Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Kylie Heap. I serve as the Executive Director of Support After Abortion. And we are all so glad that you have chosen to be with us today for a session on the power of storytelling. Today, we are going to be talking about the power of storytelling, why it works, and how it can deepen your client connections and transform the way that we communicate about hope and healing. I want to begin by introducing two of our three speakers today, Carrie Adams and Michelle Maslin. Carrie comes from a long line of storytellers, let me tell you. She decided to make a career of it. She graduated from the USC Film School, and she has a screenwriting degree and has become a published author. She's become a mother about 6 years ago. She's worked in freelance as an editor and a ghostwriter, and has helped nonprofits share their message through the power of storytelling. We're just so grateful to have you here today, Carrie. Michelle Maslin is on our team here at Support After Abortion. She serves as our communications manager. She holds a bachelor's degree in international business and a master's in business and marketing. She has 35 years experience in marketing and communications. Michelle plays a key role in shaping our messaging strategy and guiding how we use stories to create connection, build trust, and inspire healing. Last but not least, Niles Pinkney is with us. He is our men's healing coordinator at Support After Abortion, and he's also going to be part of today's session. He holds a degree in sociology and criminal justice and completed graduate work as a former college football player and a father. Niles brings personal experience of healing after abortion. He's passionate about coaching, parenting, and helping other men heal and thrive. And he also supports our providers with resources and training and connections. So let's begin our time together. And thank you again so much for being here.
Awesome. Thank you, Kylie. I'm Michelle. Thank you all for being here. At Support After Abortion, we use storytelling in nearly all of our communications: social media, website, blogs, product catalog, annual report, you name it. Stories are powerful. And today we're so excited to share with you that we have just completed a new series of videos, 6 men and 2 women, each sharing their abortion experiences and healing journeys. These are powerful, personal, and incredible video stories, and they'll be available on our YouTube channel and our website. We hope that you'll share them with your clients, volunteers, anyone you think might benefit. Today, you'll get a preview of 3 of these videos and shareable links. To protect their privacy, we used actors to tell their stories, but every bit of the stories are real, taken from interviews, but portrayed by someone else. It's one of the ways we honor privacy while honoring the storyteller's voice. So we're going to kick off our time together today with the first video.
Hey, my name's Thomas, and this is my story. I look back on my childhood, and it feels like what wound up happening shouldn't have happened. I have great parents. They're still married, and I grew up surrounded by family. Uncles, aunts, cousins. We were happy. We went to church regularly, but I guess I always enjoyed a good time. And in high school, I started drinking, smoking, dating, the whole deal. Looking back, I see a lot of that was me dealing with confidence issues. When I was 21, I got a girl pregnant. I didn't love her. I also didn't love myself, although I didn't know that at the time. I was in the middle of a party, like life was a party, and pregnancy was not a part of my party plans. She was waiting on what I would say, and what I said was have an abortion. So it was me who swayed it. I made the call. When it was over, my first reaction was relief, but the very next morning, a very different feeling hit. Years later, after I'd started working on my healing, I had an epiphany in a grocery store parking lot. It hit me that so many of the bad things that happened, things that would spiderweb out and impact my life for the next 15 years, all happened within 2 months of the abortion. I made so many bad decisions: drugs, alcohol, acting out, horrible relationships with women, the wrong friends, just complete destruction. Finally, I made a good choice. I moved away from my hometown. I wanted to quit drinking, and I didn't think I could do that surrounded by the same old scene. Just a couple days after the move, it was Father's Day, and I got blackout drunk, which, it wasn't a coincidence. But the next day, I got my courage up and I went to an AA meeting. Getting sober felt amazing. I started going to church again. Then a friend encouraged me to go to Support After Abortion's Keys to Hope and Healing program. It was strange because I'd gone to confession, I was going to AA, and I felt so good about my progress. So on one hand, I didn't feel like I needed more healing, but on the other hand, I found myself signing up. One of the things that blew my mind about the support group experience was how many older guys were there, which just goes to show you how long men can bury their feelings. And these older guys, they seemed like my dad, the kind of men who never do anything wrong, but here they were, saying all the same things I'd thought and felt. It showed me I wasn't alone. The early years after the abortion are kind of a blur, but I do remember how painful Father's Day became. Mother's Day, I was fine. I was cheerful for my mom, but Father's Day was different. I'd go to church with my parents and see my dad and others stand up when the priest would recognize all the fathers on Father's Day, and I'd think, I should be a father. And I'd wonder, why did I run from something that could have been so great? I was in my 30s and still living like an immature kid. I felt like a coward. The men who went through Keys to Hope and Healing with me understood exactly how I felt. I moved on to a deeper 12-step abortion healing program and continued to process all those emotions. It wasn't easy. It was the opposite of easy, actually. It was hard. It was uncomfortable. But as I worked my way through those 12 steps, I can't tell you the healing I experienced. I released so much tension I'd been stuffing down for so long. I had physical pains that left. It was wild, I'm telling you. And now I feel so much freedom. I'm sharing my story because of how much abortion healing has impacted me for good. I believe there's so many hurting people because of their abortions, some even drinking and doing drugs like me. And it breaks my heart because I was there. I know what it's like, but life doesn't have to be like that. It can be so much better. I'm hoping that by sharing my story, I can help somebody else find the healing that has changed my life.
I was there in person watching the filming, and seeing that actor talk about Thomas's story really related to me because as a abortion impacted man, it just felt like I was seeing the actual person tell their story. I don't know how everybody else felt, but that really hit me differently when I heard that. What moment from Thomas's story hit you the most? And why did you think that part stayed with you? And we'd love to hear your responses in the chat, please. Thank you, Deborah. Deborah said, wow, that's a very powerful testimony.
For
If
me,
we don't
Niles, it was the moment where he just didn't think he needed help. How many clients have we cared for who came to us really not motivated to get healing or enter into a group, but just having this nagging feeling that they should begin a conversation?
Yes, and that's one thing that I just felt like a lot of men can relate to, but not just men, but men and women. Seeing our after abortion line, the people that contact the clients that reach out to us and looking for support, a lot of them feel the same exact way. So just seeing this story come to life with the actor, it's a different feeling and it can make you feel more in touch.
Yes, I agree with you, Niles. And we have a couple of things coming up in the chat that are just such great observations. Thank you all so much for commenting.
Yes, thank
Thank
you so
you.
much. And we appreciate everyone's comments, and I love to direct back to Michelle.
Thank you, Niles. Thank you, everybody, for sharing your thoughts on Thomas's video. I had the privilege of speaking with Thomas a few years ago for another project, and again for this one. I just love seeing his experience told in this way that will surely help many other men. Launching these new videos gives us the perfect backdrop to talk about the science of why stories stay with us and move us to act, the place of storytelling in marketing and outreach, and the ethics of storytelling. Carrie, who is a master storyteller, is going to talk about the science in marketing, and then I'll come back to talk about the ethics.
Hello. Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate that. Awesome. All right. So I want to kick off what I have to say about storytelling with just sort of bringing us back to how deeply ingrained storytelling is into our brains. We are geared to experience the world through story. Back in ancient Greece, storytellers would memorize the Iliad and the Odyssey, which together is 28,000 lines. And the fact that these professional storytellers could memorize that and then travel around and regale everyone with these stories just goes to show how much we are wired for story. Stories, it's how we process the world, it's how we carry information, and most importantly for what we're discussing today, it's how we explain ourselves to ourselves. And that is where storytelling can be a really powerful tool in our healing journey. Just as C.S. Lewis said, we are who we believe we are. We're constantly in the process of telling our story to ourselves, sometimes without ever talking to someone else. We're repeating these stories. And how we show up in our own stories really shapes a lot of how we're going to act and our identity. So let's, without further ado, dig into the science of storytelling. And we're going to have a little bit of neuroscience, but don't worry, it won't be painful, I promise. All right, so we are going to focus first on the audience's experience, right? And when we're absorbing a story, MRIs show that, unsurprisingly, the language processing parts of the brain gets fired up, the emotional part of the brain gets fired up, but to me, surprisingly, the movement part of our brain gets fired up. And so as we are listening to somebody else's story, we are figuratively walking around in their shoes. It is as if we are living the tale ourselves. These stories, they help us understand their perspective. They help us understand their motivation. And here's the thing, with just one experience of a story, we can start to change our core beliefs. That is how powerful a story can be. And not only do we begin to change our core belief, but just as we repeat stories, as we revisit the story in our memory, that change will deepen. So this whole experience of being transported into somebody else's experience, into their story, is what researcher Paul Zak calls empathy transportation. And when we get fully engaged into somebody else's story, our brain actually releases oxytocin. And once that starts to happen, that is when he calls the empathy transportation was really launched. And this is where the magic happens. And it happens both in terms of personal transformation, and also we will revisit this when we start talking about marketing as well. All right. Let's shift gears and talk about for the storyteller. Now, this is a really long quote, and I'm glad that we have it up here on this slide so everybody can take a moment to observe it. I think this is something that'll be familiar to anybody who has worked as an abortion healing facilitator. Every single time you tell your story and someone else who cares bears witness to it, you turn off your body's stress responses, flipping off toxic stress hormones like cortisone and epinephrine, and flip on relaxation hormones such as oxytocin, dopamine, endorphins. And when those hormones are triggered, your self-repair mechanisms, basically they fire and they can function as preventative medicine or treatment if you're sick. And this relaxes your nervous system and helps heal your mind of depression, anxiety, fear, and anger and feelings of disconnection. So in other words, telling your story is good medicine.
All right.
Thank you for sharing that information, Carrie. That is very interesting, and especially brings me back to when I hear stories from everyone else and their emotions and how they really can connect. So we'd love to hear from everyone else as well. If you've ever supported someone as they told their story for the first time, what did you notice? What did you seem to unlock for them? Stella put in the chat, it was difficult to share, but there was a release of the burden that they were carrying. And I can relate to that as well with spending some time on our after abortion line. A lot of clients that reach out to us and told their stories and their experience have said, I haven't told anybody else. And finally being able to express that and talk about my emotions with someone just feels like a release and a weight lifted off their shoulders. So just sometimes being that hearing, listening ear and being able to give them unjudgmental thoughts and opinions and just be that ear that they need to bend. I don't know how many people heard that saying. It's something that really means a lot to those that reach out.
Awesome. Thank you, Niles. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you so much for everyone in the chat. Back to you, Carrie.
Thanks. So as everyone was just expressing, that weight of repressed thoughts and feelings, it does harm. It actually does physical harm. There's a strong correlation between the anxiety that comes from repressed thoughts and feelings and cardiovascular disease. So when we are repressing our thoughts and feelings, it can actually prompt these thoughts to actually reoccur more often. It's like a game of whack-a-mole, right? Like you try to repress those thoughts and feelings and they pop right back up. But once we tell our story and we let the light in, the light is the best antiseptic, right? It heals us. And also, when we have these repressed thoughts and feelings and they're hiding in the dark corners of our minds, they take really scary shapes. And when we share our stories with the light, it helps us to align those thoughts and feelings, our story, with reality. And that reality is very healing, it's very cleansing. It helps scare away our worst fears and improves our understanding of our own situation. All right, so this takes us into storytelling and marketing. And just as I said before, we're going to revisit that empathy transportation. All right, when we are sharing stories with others in the context of marketing, whether it's a written story or it's simply hearing a story, it is not nearly as powerful as when visuals are involved. Visual storytelling is much, much more powerful at creating that empathy transportation. This also comes from the same research of Paul Zak, the researcher on empathy transportation. These visually told, just like when we're watching Thomas. So we're hearing Thomas's story, but we're also witnessing this actor convey these thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And it's so helpful for us because our minds, they want to make pattern out of chaos. And in the aftermath of an abortion experience, there can be a lot of chaos. And when we hear other people's stories, it helps us to make a pattern out of that chaos. And we live in this society that really wants to put things into black and white. They want things to be either or. And when we're trying to explain ourselves, it can be really difficult to do that when our story involves a lot of nuance, a lot of complexity. And it can be really hard to express, the truth that we feel, because lots of times our truth is really a yes and truth. For example, yes, I felt relief and I felt heartbreak. And stories have a special ability to take that complexity and that nuance and help us get a better handle on our own complicated stories.
So as Carrie says, talking to those that say yes and, what's one example of yes and emotions you heard a client share? We love to hear your feedback and want to give everybody a chance to share.
Niles, as we're waiting for people to get their thumbs to work, putting something in the chat, one of the ones that I think we hear a lot of on the after abortion line that surprised me so much when I joined this organization was the yes to feeling grief while also feeling relief. And that complexity and guilt that came from feeling relief when the grief was the reason that they came to us.
Yes, and I feel like most abortion healing experiences, that is something that is commonly felt because this experience is something that you just can't sift through emotions and thoughts and opinions from others. And it can be a lot for one to take in. I know myself had that experience where I said, yes, it's over. I had my abortion experience, but then I always felt these other things and I'm angry and I'm like sad some days. I don't even know why because I haven't really taken that chance to express my emotions and everything I'm going through. So I feel like when it comes to abortion experiences, that's something that's common.
What's something that you felt, Niles, after the impact of your partner's abortion?
My story was a lot of it was regret and a little bit of I felt like I wasn't there. It was yes, it happened, and yes, I'm glad I talked about it, but now it's I feel upset because now I gotta take on and take accountability for what happened because that was something that I felt like maybe I could have changed or I could have done more to help with our healing process or done research. So that was some of the things that went through my mind during my abortion experience.
Niles, it's been so prominent in my mind the way that as a man you processed it, the lack of protection of your partner for being
Yes,
alone.
yes, and it was one of those things that just being the person I am, because I really cared for her and my partner, and just feeling like I couldn't do anything and support her in that moment gave me a sense of like I was weak and I wasn't protecting her like I always told her I would. So that was just one of the common thoughts I've always had, and to the point where I had to push that thought out of my mind because it became very unhealthy for me because I started overcompensating in other areas with maybe if she looks a little bit like she's not her normal self, I say, "Are you okay? Are you sad?" And sometimes she's just quiet and just wants a time to to be quiet, but I think that caused me to be very just overbearing, which wasn't healthy for her or myself.
Yeah. Melanie, thank you for affirming that you're also receiving those same kind of conversations we are. Michelle, back to you.
Thank you, everybody. Carrie, it's yours.
Thank you. So Forbes magazine recommends 5 qualities for storytelling for maximum effectiveness in your marketing. Number 5, authenticity. Even if your story is an amalgamation of true stories or outright fiction, there's authenticity that people will feel if it's true to the experience of someone who's in recovery from an abortion experience. So authenticity is so important, and people can always sense anything sort of fakey from like a mile away. Number 2, knowing your audience. Again, this is so important that the content of your storytelling speaks to the needs of your audience as opposed to what you want to make it. It's about what they need. Number 3, clear message. Very simple, but it's so important. Just like with Thomas's video, it was a very clear message. We had a simple story with a beginning, middle, and end. It was clear and concise, and that will help us remember it. Number 4, emotional appeal. Particularly in this space of abortion experience healing, it's very important that we cut to the heart of what's happening. And number 5, visual and verbal elements. As I previously mentioned, people are so much more likely to engage in that empathy transportation if you have both visual and verbal elements, so they can really engage with the story. And that brings me to my final slide, which is that 92% of people prefer marketing that has storytelling. And that is just a really compelling statistic to me. I think it just speaks to the very first slide of how deeply storytelling is ingrained in the human mind and how much we crave it. So when we utilize storytelling in our marketing, it just is that much more effective. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Carrie. As Kylie said, have spent over 3 decades in marketing and communications, so I know the value of storytelling. But wasn't it fascinating to hear the science behind why stories are so effective? Now that we all understand so well from Carrie why and how stories impact us, let's watch part of another one of our videos.
A Bob Marley song has been playing in my head recently, especially the lines, "You can't run away from yourself, and every man thinks his burden is the heaviest." It made me think back to when I was surrounded by people and none of them knew what was weighing on me. I was in a hole and didn't see a way out. I was actually contemplating ending my life and just running away from myself. And nobody knew because I didn't let them in. I'm Osei, and here's my story. My dad left when I was young. I lived with my mom in the village where my parents grew up. Our church was very rigid and strict. When I got older, I didn't want any part of it. I started drinking and partying. I felt I had a good life. I had a great job, a car, and a girlfriend. I would say I was living my dream. My mom had always told me, "You better not get any girl pregnant." But I didn't think about it. I guess I believed it wouldn't happen until it did. My girlfriend at the time also had very strict rules. And having a child could ruin things with her parents who were sponsoring her and her sister to go to America. We both agreed that abortion was our only option. I don't remember much of that day. I don't recall how she got to the clinic or how I felt. The one thing I do remember is how sad she was when I picked her up afterwards. Even though we both agreed, seeing her deep sadness, I felt I had forced her into it. My life took a lot of turns after that. I'm not sure I could say that I was operating out of pain because I didn't think about it. It was a secret I locked away in a box.
What moment from Osei's story hit you the most, and why do you think that part stayed with you? We'd love to see what everyone says in the chat. Right back to you, Michelle.
Yeah. All right, so we have somebody saying they could understand personally the locked in a box. Thank you all. I appreciate your sharing your thoughts, recognizing his girlfriend's pain. It's such an impactful story, and the actor for Osei just knocked it out of the park with his portrayal of the real man. I want to go back to that stat that Carrie shared, the 92% of people prefer marketing with storytelling. That is definitely a reason to use stories, because stories can be a bridge between hearts. But we need to always remember that stories aren't just stories or tools for marketing or outreach. There is a real person with real pain and struggles behind those words. So the ethics of it is really all about being compassionate, being an active listener, and trying to put yourself in their shoes. It is truly such an honor to be invited into someone's emotional space to listen to their experiences and to help them tell their story. As you all know, it can be really hard to share your story and to tell it succinctly in an audience engaging way in 5 to 7 minutes. Well, that's just not how most of us think. That's where partnering with a writer can really help. We come alongside to shape their story with them in a way that honors their experience and connects with others. In ethical storytelling, the storyteller has their hands on the wheel. We're not steering for them. They are driving their own story, and we're making space for their voice. And this leads us into discussing agency, which means the ability to make your own choices, act and speak according to your own values, need, and timing. In the context of abortion healing and storytelling, agency means the person sharing their story is in control. They decide if they want to share, when and whether they feel ready, how much they want to share, with whom they want to, and where their story goes, and whether it's ever shared publicly, and that they have the power to change their mind. No matter where we are in the process, if somebody asks us to stop using their story, even years later, we need to honor that. When a person doesn't have agency, they may feel re-traumatized by being rushed or exposed, feel pressure and say yes and then regret it later. They may feel like their healing is invalid unless it's public. We've heard this from clients, especially people working or volunteering in abortion healing, that somebody has told them that they can't be fully healed until they share their story publicly. And that's just not true. You don't have to share your story, and especially publicly. When people do have agency, they're more likely to feel safe and respected, share in ways that truly support their healing, and stay engaged in the process of growth. So we're going to do a quick poll here. Think about, have you ever seen a client, A, thrive when given space to make their own decisions about sharing, B, withdraw or pull back when pressured to share when they didn't feel ready, or C, you've witnessed both these things? And Kylie, when you get any responses, can you share with us what the poll shows?
Yes, I would be thrilled to share that with you. The majority of our participants today have seen both.
Thank you for sharing that. I am not surprised that you've seen both. One of the things we want to talk about is how protecting clients' stories in marketing is really part of trauma-informed care. And this is best practice even if an individual's abortion experience might not be considered trauma or traumatic to them or by clinical standards. So let's look at the 6 principles of trauma-informed care offered by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, and see how these apply to storytelling. A simple explanation of trauma-informed care is treating people with an understanding that they might be carrying invisible emotional wounds and trying to make sure we don't accidentally poke them. The first principle is safety, prioritizing physical and emotional safety for everybody involved. Number two is trustworthiness and transparency, making decisions openly and building trust over time. So we're going to be clear about what the story will be used for, who will see it, and how consent works, including that it can be revoked. Number three is about how healing happens in connection with others with similar lived experiences. Shared understanding and mutual support can foster trust, reduce stigma and shame, and create a sense of safety. We do want to avoid comparing experiences or pressuring anyone. So, like, you wouldn't want to say, you should share your story like Susie did. Or, if we feature your story on social media, it would help so many people. It doesn't mean you can't ask. It's just the way you ask and that you avoid pressuring them. Number four is collaborating as equals. It's about partnership and relationship. The individuals should be part of shaping how their story is told, because it's not our story to use. It's their story to offer. And so you'll want to engage them in the process, having drafts for approval, saying things like, how do you want this said or that shared? Our process with the storytellers in our new video series was deeply collaborative and transparent. The fifth principle is empowerment, voice, and choice. The storyteller is in control of their story. So there's no one right way to tell it, and our role is to respect their choice. The last principle of trauma-informed care is about how each person's story is shaped. Each person's story is shaped by their life experience, culture, faith, and gender. So be mindful of how someone's background can influence what they share and how they want it shared. What feels empowering to one person may feel unsafe or inappropriate to another. All right, we have another poll. Have you ever come across a story that made you pause? Maybe the story was online, in a video, in print. Maybe somebody told it to you, and you wondered if it truly honored the person whose story was being told. So A is for yes, B is for no, and C is not sure. And then Kylie, you can share those results with us.
The majority of our responses, about 60% currently, are saying yes, they have seen a story told where they wondered if it was honoring to that person. And
Thank
that
you.
number is climbing. We're up to 70% right now, Michelle.
I wish I could say I was surprised, but sadly, I am not. Thank you, everyone, for sharing what your experiences are. Carrie talked about how stories help the listener step into the storyteller's shoes to understand their perspective, motivation, and experience. In ethical storytelling, especially abortion healing, it's not just about how a story moves others, it's also about how we handle what someone trusts us with. So we need to ask ourselves, is this how they told it to me? Is this how they'd want it to be told? How would they feel seeing it shared in this way with this person or audience at this time? And it's helpful for us to remember these aren't just marketing questions. They matter in every interaction. A client, a colleague, a volunteer, a neighbor, someone in the waiting room in your family, at your church. When you're involved in abortion healing or have shared your own story, chances are people might open up to you. It might even be the first time they've told anyone. And when they tell you in person, email, text, recognize that they're telling you. They've trusted you. And that doesn't mean it's okay to pass it along. Even with good intentions, telling what someone shared with you, especially with their name or details, without asking first, can break the trust and could really harm their healing. So we don't want to assume, don't forward, don't retell, unless they've said it's okay. So we're going to talk briefly about the types of stories that we use and that you can use. All of these methods help us tell meaningful, authentic stories and convey truth, build awareness, compassion, empathy, without compromising privacy. The first type is an anonymous quote. They are the client's or person's words, but without names or identifying information. It's typically a snippet of someone's story. our lived experience resource, which is on our website, and most of our quotes on our website, blogs, etc., are anonymous quotes. While they are a specific person's words, we've removed anything identifiable. And by this careful, compassionate editing, their voice is honored and their experience is heard in a way that many people could see themselves and that others can gain an understanding of the person's experience. The second type is composite stories. These are puzzle pieces or elements of a composite story. They're all real quotes, but they're combined from multiple people's stories and blended into one narrative. The next type is called representative stories, and these also combine multiple people's stories, but in a way that it's reflective of common experiences, themes, words, phrases. It's a blur of something you could hear or have heard from many clients, but not exactly words from any particular client. Another type of story is fiction based on real themes. I am sure you have all seen this on TV. This story is fiction, inspired by a real story. These stories are intentionally crafted to protect privacy and to not be exactly somebody's real story. The names are changed, locations are changed, any elements of the story that could identify them are changed, and fictional elements are added in. These stories typically intermingle anonymous quotes, composite stories, representative stories, along with completely fictionalized elements. And the last type of story we're going to talk about are fully shared stories. There are two types of these. In both cases, the storyteller is fully engaged in the process. The first, the storyteller is identified by name. Their image may even be used, and that's with full consent. The second is the storyteller remains anonymous. Places and names are changed. If it's filmed, an actor is used. If it's in print, there's might be a picture, but it's not the real person. And yet every part of the story is authentically the storyteller's. And this is the type of story that our videos are. We'd like to share with you one more video in our new series.
Hello, I'm Anna, and this is my story. It's been 4 years since my abortion. We had a previous abortion years before when we were young and our relationship was still very new. That abortion didn't really affect either of us, but this time was different. When I was invited to share my story, I pulled out the notebook I wrote in when I was going through my after-abortion healing group. As I read it, I remembered just how sad and broken I was. It was about a month or so after the abortion that I wrote. I sat on the bathroom floor staring at those two lines with my husband, staring at me in the doorway. And that night, I filled out an online questionnaire to order the pills, and 2 days later, I took the pill and started crying uncontrollably. I didn't even know how far along I was, and that question still haunts me. The online questionnaire results dated the pregnancy at 4 weeks, but I didn't think that was right from the timing. And after comparing what I saw to fetal development pictures, I was probably at 12 weeks. I wrote in my journal about how I had saved an avocado seed because it was starting to sprout. And how could I care more about this seed than my own? I thought about how my mom had an abortion scheduled when she was pregnant with me, but she didn't go through with it. And I wrote, "Why am I so weak? Where is my motherly instinct for something other than a stupid avocado seed?" I didn't know what to do with the fetus. I couldn't just bury it. I was worried my dog would dig it up. I wrapped it in a paper towel, and it sat on a shelf in my closet. It was a daily reminder. I wrote in my journal, maybe I'm keeping it to punish myself. The one thing I do know is that I'm hurting inside, and I don't know how to heal. Keys to hope and healing saved me. I hadn't spoken to a single person through the whole mail order and abortion process, and every communication was an automated text. Even when I reached out for help when my emotions were so out of control, I got a generic text message followed by a text with some resource links. And that's when I searched online and found support after abortion. The woman talked with me. She told me what I was going through was common, and I was able to start in a virtual group a few weeks later. I really needed that face-to-face support. It helped a lot to hear other people's stories and to know I wasn't alone. And one day, toward the end, I read to the group from my journal, and I saw them looking at me with compassion and understanding. It was a safe space to talk and cry and share, and it helped me understand my emotions. They helped me believe that I could move on, and it's so cliche, but it was like that weight I was carrying just came off, and I could breathe.
We'd love to hear your thoughts about Anna's story. I'll share that this video just really hits me. As Anna said, she's one of our volunteers, and I know her. And through this project, I know her story well. And I didn't expect to feel anything during the filming, but this actress was so spot on that I wasn't hearing her. I was hearing Anna's voice and her tears as she told me this story for the first time. I really encourage you to watch this video and Osei's to the end when you get the links. Niles, do you want to share anything about this one?
Of course, it was really very impactful, and I think the actor did a great job of focusing and showing us that experience. What moment from Anna's story hit you the most, and why do you think that part stayed with you? And we also want to say thank you again for participating and give us your feedback. Back to you, Michelle.
All right, we might have time for one question, Niles. Have you
Yes.
had something pop up?
So I have a question for you, Michelle. What's an ethical way to ask people to participate or share their story for a resource or marketing project?
That's a great question. Ideally, you have some sort of trusted relationship of some type already established, or it could be that someone they trust has referred them to you. And then really the most compassionate way to ask is by email, not in person or on the phone or even a text, because this gives them time to think about it and not feel pressured. And be sure your words in your email convey that. For ours, each person did have a trusted connection to somebody on our team, maybe through events or a group or mentoring, volunteering, some other project, or just everyday life. And we did the process through email.
Thank you for answering that. And that's great for anybody that wants to ask stories or get any stories from anybody they're working with. I really appreciate that.
Thank you all for your questions and for being here. Kylie, do you want to say any final words?
If any of you are struggling with what you heard across our webinar today, I encourage you to call us on our after abortion line. You may need some support because sometimes those icky, sticky feelings that we have that pop up when we hear somebody's stories are an opportunity for us to dig deeper into our own healing and have something new be revealed to us. And even as providers, as executive directors, as leaders in our community, we deserve help. So I encourage you, if you need help, please reach out to us because we're here for you. Thank you so much, Carrie, Michelle, and Niles, for your significant leadership in today's webinar. Carrie, it was a pleasure having you. I think this is your debut in our abortion healing provider webinars. Without further ado, I will let everyone go. We look forward to seeing you at the next meetings and webinars that we host.